All right. Listen up, chummers. I'm about to slot you some Drek on the sixth world that'll make it so you know what the frag is going on out there. All right, listening? Rule number 1, geek the mage first. Rule number 2, never deal with a dragon. And rule number 3, never trust an elf. Hey everybody, it's Scott here at my newest RPG Spotlight, the one for January. This month I am kind of focusing on cyberpunk themed things, and I try to stick to the trend of like talking about subjects that influenced me, stuff that matters to me quite a bit. So my RPG Spotlight, like I know last time December's the first one was on Mecha Hack, which I wouldn't necessarily say was a tremendous influence over me, like my early stage gaming development, but it because it just came out, but it did sort of influence the way that I looked at RPG design. I was already in the middle of Maximum Apocalypse when I got a hold of it, but it has influenced Beta Red quite a bit, so that's why I did that. But anyway, today we're going to talk about my number one RPG. I'm just kidding. My number one RPG is actually Call of Cthulhu. We're not doing that one. That's going to be, I think next month I'll do that one. No, this is actually, we're going to talk about on the first RPG I ever played, the game that introduced me to RPGs in general, which is a little bit of a caveat statement because I had, apparently when I was a kid, my dad tried to teach me D&D, but I didn't know what was going on. He just like had me come into the room. He's like, hey Scott, sit at the table. I want to do this thing. Have you got these people in this world that I'm doing, and I want you to kind of play as, like, tell me what they would say and what they would do in these situations. And it was like an hour of us sort of walking through. I thought he was writing a book, and he kind of expressed that that's what he was doing, but in the end it turned out we were playing Dungeons & Dragons. But I didn't roll any dice, so I have no idea what version of Dungeons & Dragons we were playing where I didn't roll any dice. But so anyway, years later, I was introduced to the game that I'm about to show you now. I've rambled for about a minute. Today we're going to talk about Shadowrun. That's my RPG Spotlight. I have 2 books here, and there's a reason for that. The reason is this is 6th edition Shadowrun, the pink dragon, thing at the top, like Native American totem dragon thing. And then this is 6th edition. It's the current edition of Shadowrun, and I have it, and I will give you my hot take on it in a moment. But the reason why I also have the 5th edition book is not just to show off that I have different editions. I, in fact, have books that go all the way back to 3rd edition, which was the edition I started playing. So I could, right behind me, there's a closet. In the closet has 3rd edition source books because they still have pertinent information about locations and things and like pulling from them. And then like all my 4th edition stuff's in a box at my mom's house, but I ran an entire campaign in 4th edition. That was like a whole school year, a college school year. And then there's this 5th edition where I ran when it came out. It was like 2014. It had been out for like a year-ish, a little bit over, and I ran an entire like 20-session campaign with like side story quests for the individual characters to develop the players to develop the character background and stuff. And this is the one that I did this whole campaign. That's why it's falling apart. It's actually falling apart. Like the pages are not in there. I'm actually having to hold them in. They would come out of the binding here. You can see. But it's not just to show off. There's actually a thing. Everyone right now, like this one exists, and if you go to conventions, this is the one that you'll see people playing. This is the official current version, and they kind of have some supplements for it, which kind of suck, but it's whatever. Like 3 of them are encyclopedias. I don't know why I need that, but that's fine. But anyway, this is the one being played at conventions and things because it's the current edition, but this is the one that people are actually still playing. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. Little thing. This is actually the 3rd time I made this video. I keep going way, way over time, so I'm going to try to like truncate everything I have to say. Shadowrun, for those of you that don't know, here's the super crash course. Super crash course for you because I've done this, like I said, 2 other times or 3 other times. So I got it down now. Super crash course. It's basically the near future version of our world, but in the near future of our world, the 6th age of man began. The 6th age of the world began, and the history and lore of the creations of FASA Corporation, which is the original creator of Shadowrun, also the original creator of Earth Dawn, Traveler, the original Star Trek RPG, BattleTech, Crimson Skies, which is then now a video game, etc. I could go on forever. They made a bunch of stuff. In 1989, they created this cyberpunk game. And the idea they wanted to roll with was that there were these ages of sort of ebb and flow of magic and tech. And so the 4th age, which is the Earth Dawn RPG universe, was the age before our current age, and then Shadowrun, and then our current age is the 5th age, and then Shadowrun, which is the age after our current age, is the 6th age. And there was magic in the 4th age, the prehistorical age, and then there's magic in the Shadowrun age. So that's sort of the difference. Like right now, we don't have magic; we're all tech, and that's kind of what the deal is. So anyway, so that's the lore of the world. And because of this magic, there was unexpected genetic expression where people were born with elf ears and they grew into tall, slender, elfy things. Or there's like a story in, I think, 5th edition, like one of the first stories. There's a troll that's actually like an 18-year-old Japanese girl, but at some point, when puberty kicked in, they started growing horns and like dermal armor and stuff like that. And so they became like this monstrous beast. And so that's unexpected genetic expression. And there's kind of some depending on the version of Shadowrun, the edition you're playing, there's a little bit of different like explanation for why that happened. There's some stuff with a comet. There's some stuff with some viruses. And that's a big thing because the world has like collapsed under a big virus. Well, it hasn't collapsed. Let's take it back. So it collapsed because of magic. Like there was a big fight between Native Americans and the United States government. Oh, gee whiz. That wouldn't be unheard of, right? And so they had a big fight and it caused a bunch of things to happen and actually accidentally sort of kickstarted the magic and woke up dragons. And so this new age of magic began. And the world sort of went into anarchy when people could start slinging spells at each other and summoning spirits to do work for them and, stuff like that. So like that's why the anarchy happened. But there was a virus that spread, a couple of viruses that spread through the world, and so there's actually like weird other fantastical creatures, which you do encounter or can encounter in Shadowrun. But the population is less than it currently is, despite like all these crazy cool tech things that will keep you alive. It's much more dangerous, and there's a lot less people. But that's sort of the plot. But to give you a little bit more Shadowrunning background before I really talk about my feelings about it. The world is run by... So the world is... All the governments have sort of collapsed a bit. They're actually really weak because who really rules the world are the Big Ten. There are 10 mega corporations that have this condition called extraterritoriality, which was granted by the United States government back when the United States government was the superpower, to allow them to be able to like basically be sovereign commanders over their own territories so that they can do things like defend themselves against protesters and stuff who would try to invade their space, which, another thing that wouldn't be unheard of, protesters invading businesses and then the businesses fighting back. So this granted extraterritoriality allowed the corporations to essentially build their own private armies, and then those private armies could legit kill people that were on their property. So then as these mega corporations grew, the Big Ten grew, and they sort of took over large swaths of the world, or built like these gated communities, these sort of enclosed buildings or structural arcologies. They're called in arcology. They're architecture, ecology. It's arcology. In the larger cities, they essentially were able to like do their own police forces and their own like grounds of containment. It's a whole big mess, but they essentially rule the world. They're actually much more important than any of the governments, though the governments have some influence, but it's actually the megacorps that are the big players and shakers. And the Big Ten, it depends on the version of Shadowrun you're going to play as to what those Big Ten are, but there's basically always going to be a Renraku Corporation, a Seder Krupp Corporation, an Ares Macrotech Corporation, a Mitsuhama Corporation. I think those are the big ones that you'll like always find. I'm sure I'm missing one or two, like Wuxing or Xiaowase or something. But there's always going to be these certain ones, and then each version of Shadowrun, each edition changes out a couple of them, so that each edition is a little bit different. But the idea is that like all of the mega corporations have this extraterritoriality, and then all of the smaller corporations that are not in the Big Ten, that are still AAA corporations that are trying to be in the Big Ten, they kind of have it too, but they're also probably subsidiaries or like best friends with some of the Big Ten, so therefore they have the Big Ten extraterritoriality abilities, right? Or they'll hire the Big Ten to do security for them or something. But these Big Ten are always kind of at odds with each other. They always are fighting over things. There's always espionage and stuff. So they essentially pay unregistered or nobody citizens that are disconnected to the companies because they're not like a member of their wage slaves or whatever, to go out and do these runs, which are what you call these semi-legal illicit jobs that you do. These runs in the shadows of the big 10 and the other corporations and governments, right? And that's why it's called Shadowrun. That's the name of the game, and that's the reason it exists. And you play one of those people who is a shadow runner. Now, you could have a background that says like you kind of grew up in a corporation or whatever. That's on you if that's what you decide. But currently, you're doing illegal stuff. You have a fake ID. You've got a car that's unregistered and not using the grid maps because you want to be as obscure and secretive or covert as possible. And that's the name of the game. Or you're just a troll biker. Getting to the reason why I love Shadowrun. The reason why Shadowrun holds a special place in my heart, and will always hold a special place in my heart, is because in 2002, the summer of 2002, I was approached by a couple of friends, my best friend at the time and his friends, and said, they were like, we know that you're into this like miniature war game called Mage Knight. We know that you have this interest in some lore of a game called Warhammer 40K. We know that you say that you like these kinds of like fantasy and stuff, and you like watching a lot of animated movies. What about trying out a tabletop RPG? Well, they called it a role-playing game at the time. They didn't say tabletop RPG, but you get my drift. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I legit did not know really what it was. I had done a lot of choose your own adventure books, and like I said, I had that weird experience with my dad, but didn't know that I was doing Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know that at all. He didn't even tell me that it was Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't until I got like his books later on when I was a role player and he gave me all of his stuff that I realized I was playing like Dungeons and Dragons, like early edition Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, as far as like 1984, that's when I was born, was Dungeons and Dragons. But anyway, so they said, hey, why don't you come try this thing with us? And basically they had been playing with 3 players and 1 game master, and one of the 3 players was a problematic player. I mean, like they were gonna basically disband the group because of this one problematic player. And when you have a group of 3 players and one's problematic, it really is tough. So they were trying to add another player who would not be a problem, and so they went out on a limb and they invited me. And showed up on the first day. I didn't have the book because I didn't know I needed to buy it or read it. I didn't know that. I didn't have dice because I didn't know that I needed them, and they didn't tell me. Great, right? And I didn't have a character because I didn't know I needed to bring one. So I just sort of showed up in the park where they were meeting outside near where my friend lived. And so it was not too far from where I lived. I used to walk to my friend's house all the time. And I go there and I show up and the game master's like, oh, you didn't prepare at all. And I was like, prepare? I didn't know I was supposed to. You guys invited me to play a game. I assumed you had all the pieces. And they were like, well, we do, so it's fine. And he gave me an NPC, a biker, a troll biker that they had fought in a previous session. This was like their 5th session of this campaign. And they had like established the backstories for each of their characters. And they had gotten into a fight with a troll biker, and he handed me the NPC sheet, and he's like, all right, so the deal is that like his character is already made, and so you can't really do anything to adjust it, but you can make it cosmetic changes all you want. You can give him brown hair or black hair or no hair, or he wears like certain kinds of t-shirts or whatever his name is. Like you can do all those cosmetic changes, but you can't change any of these stats. And I was like, okay, what do these stats mean? And they were like, that's how many 6-sided dice you roll. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I just rolled them, and they're like, yeah, when we do stuff, you'll just roll them, and like you'll need to, have a certain number of like 5s and 6s and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, well, all right, let's try it out. So like I was like, cool. I'm like, he's Jewish because I was dating a Jewish girl all the time, and I still have an interest in like Judaism. And so I was like, he's Jewish, and his name is, I don't know, Chaim, but everyone just calls him Jewy the Troll. And like, I mean, it was kind of bad, but whatever. And I was like, and he's a biker. And they're like, yeah, sure, he's a biker. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he's a biker. And he loves his motorcycle. And I was just like trying to come up with some things because I was writing at the time. I have been writing since like the 5th grade. So I just tried to create this character. And then we got into the story, and like 2 minutes in, I had like kicked open a door and like knocked out one of the other players. And I was like, wow, this game, like, you can literally do whatever your imagination comes up with. And they were like, yeah, you can do whatever your imagination. So then we went to, like, a meet with a Johnson, and it went south, like, real bad. Not for my fault. It just went south. Like, it was a trap. It was a setup for something that happened in the previous session. And we got attacked. And so I was just like, I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, my character's just going to pull his shotgun out and just start walking toward the dudes shooting at us. I'm just going to start blasting them. And that's when I discovered that trolls in 3rd edition Shadowrun, not so much in later editions, but they still are really badass, but were basically invincible. So that was the whole session. It was great. It was wonderful. I beat a bunch of dudes up and killed a bunch of dudes, and that was what led me to want to play tabletop RPGs forever. And so like Shadowrun will always hold a special place in my heart, because that was my gateway drug, as it were, into the RPG world. So but the cool thing about Shadowrun is it's a cyberpunkian world with Tolkien elements. So FASA Corporation, who created it, Jordan Weissman and Ross Babbick, they wanted to create a cyberpunk game. Apparently did not know that Cyberpunk had come out, and I believe that story to some extent, because Cyberpunk, the RPG, was actually the first RPG to come out. Cyberpunk First Edition was actually the first Cyberpunk RPG to come out. It came out in 1988, and Shadowrun came out in 1989, so 1 year later. However, from all of my research, the Cyberpunk RPG was actually like not very well received, partially because it had gone like old school style, like really old school, which is weird to say at that time because that's still old school. But they went back to like the original versions of like Dungeons and Dragons, which was like, it was like 4 game aid books and like some dice. Like that was all that's what you got when you bought the game. It didn't have an index. Everything wasn't in one book, which like D&D had already started doing like 10 years before that. And so it was like not well received. It had some flaws, and there was lots of typos and missing tables and stuff. And so nobody really, like the people that knew it existed didn't really think it was that great. And then a lot of people just didn't know it existed because it was still kind of like niche. And so it wasn't until a couple years later when Cyberpunk 2020 came out that people knew that Cyberpunk existed. But Shadowrun launched in 1989 and was well received because, and this is one of the traditions of Shadowrun, is the art kicked ass. And the art has always kicked ass. The 6th edition art is kick ass. Like, just flipping through, like I just opened to a random page, like here, like I just opened to a random page. Look, there's some art. That's some pretty cool art, right? And let's just flip. I'll just grab something like this. Like, more kick-ass art. So, like, it's got some great art. So it was well received. And the one thing that they realized, and this is the main thing, is that they realized what everyone in the gaming industry eventually figures out, is that Dungeons & Dragons sells. And so they were like, let's do a cyberpunking game that pulls from Tolkien elements. And what they meant was, let's steal all of the fantasy races from Dungeons & Dragons and slot them into this cyberpunkian world. And so they did. And so there's like these viruses and stuff and this unexpected genetic expression that allows you to basically be a Dungeons & Dragons race. You can be a troll or an orc or an elf or a dwarf or a gnome or a minotaur or a, dark elf or whatever. And you can be a vampire in Shadowrun, and also still have like a bunch of tech and play a hacker who breaks into like systems and steals money and data and stuff, or like a street samurai who's just like completely decked out with cyberware and like kills people with their hand blades and stuff like that. Or a mage who can summon spirits to do jobs for them, to basically be a second character or a fighter on their behalf, but then also can sling some pretty powerful spells that'll melt you in your armor. And so like this game allows you to play like 3 different levels, like a physical world kind of level, a digital world level, and like an astral world level. You have these like different levels that you can play where you can like astral project through walls to find out what's going on in like the room nearby, like how many dudes are in there, come back and tell all the others, and then your decker like opens the door, it's like this secure door, and then your street samurai, troll biker with a shotgun goes like and just kills everybody. And that's how Shadowrun breaks down. And so it's to me a very exciting, fun system, because everything is built on that, except for, and I'm at that long point in my video, except for the controversy. See, all the previous versions of Shadowrun, all the way up to the Red 5, as it were, the different Shadowrun editions had different colors for the thing, so that's why this is red and this is pink. The 4th edition was a blue-green, and the 3rd edition was like a grayish silver, and so on. But the fifth edition stuck to the old traditions. It sort of changed. Oops, this one. It sort of changed up the initiative a little bit. It went in reverse order. So previous versions of initiative were that you had a number. Your initiative number was a number. That was the combination of your reaction and intuition. And so it was like 10, 15, 20, whatever. Those who've played Maximum Apocalypse can recognize this because I kind of borrowed this system a bit. But then you also rolled a number of d6s. You always had one d6 automatically that you rolled. But you rolled a number of d6s based on your situation. Were you on drugs? Did you have cyberware that does cool enhancements? Are you locked into the VR? If you're in VR, are you doing hot simming or cold simming? And those basically just mean, are you doing it with like protection so you can't die, or are you just going full on mode where I'm just going to go blast out the thing? Because those change how many dice you get to roll. And then you roll those dice, you take all those numbers and you add them to that initiative number. So if you could roll all those dice and you get like a 45, that's your initiative. Your initiative is 45. And the reason why that mattered was because in all, like, I think all the way up to like fourth edition, the highest numbers went first, right, as you would expect, and then you minused. Actually, you took the highest number, and then you broke initiative down by tens from that highest number. So if the highest person in your group had a 45, then the 40 to 50 block was your first initiative block, right? And then you had the 40 to 30 block, and the 30 to 20 block, and the 10 to the 20 to 10, and then 10 to 0. And that's how you did initiative. And you went in reverse. So the fastest people got to do a bunch of stuff before the others even got to start acting. So your street samurais were basically like elite ninjas that could like chop people 3, 4, 5 times before anyone else got to do anything. In 5th edition, they switched it up, and this one. And so in 5th edition, they switched it up and they did it the reverse way so that everyone acts on the first round, right? You still have that same system of giving like these really big initiative numbers. Everyone acted on the first round, but then you minus 5 from everyone's initiative. That's Maximum Apocalypse, sorry. You minus 10 from everyone's initiative, and certain actions that you did, like if you wanted to like do like parries and cool like ripostes, and you wanted to like do some martial arts and ninja kick some dude in the face or whatever, or jump in front of bullets so that your friends didn't get hurt. Whatever the case was, you could lower your initiative by doing those actions. But anyway, everyone went first, and then you minus 10 from everyone. Anyone who still had initiative continued to do things, etc. And at the time when everyone ran out, that was the end of the combat round, and that's how you had like action phases. You had initiative passes during your combat round, right? And then that was one combat round, and then you had grenades and go off and spells that hit and stuff like that. And that's how initiative worked. 6th edition. They decided to get away with that. They decided to just go. They wanted to be more streamlined and more rules light, so they cut that out, and they sort of cut out a bunch of stuff. But so doing that changed up all of combat. So now when you go into combat in Shadowrun 6th edition, you basically have 2 actions. You had your a minor action and a major action. And the minor actions are all really boring and stupid, and most of the time not going to help you. The ones that do help you, like taking aim or like doing other things, most of those need to be like called shots, need to be directly followed by a major action. And so it's really useless because you're basically sacrificing your minor action to do the major action. You just get like an extra die, or whatever. And so it's kind of weird that they did that, because you basically get one action on your turn. That's really all you get. Except maybe you want to say a phrase, then you get a minor action. So you can't use your minor action and the major action in the same turn if you wanted to use it for something else, right? You have to sacrifice it. But so they changed that up quite a bit. As far as action sequences go in Shadowrun by changing that. They also, instead of having these things where in previous editions where you took damage, you could then soak the damage. Your armor and your body would soak the damage up, and you wouldn't get hurt as much if you were wearing like really awesome armor, for example. It wasn't damage reduction, but it gave you more dice to roll, and the more hits you got, the more damage you soaked up. In 6th edition, that's not how it works. Your armor doesn't actually do any kind of damage reduction or soaking at all. It just gives you an additional number to your defense. And so, and instead of having like recoil and all these different complicated things like the previous editions of Shadowrun did, they like made it an attack rating. Your your weapon has an attack rating, and that attack rating is the attack rating. That's it. That's what your attack rating is. And it's all that complicated stuff. You reduce to one number, and then you compare your attack rating to the defense rating of the other person. So if the other person wearing impressive armor, they may have a high defense number, or whatever. And whichever side has the higher number by 4 gets an edge point, which they can use to make effects happen. An edge point is kind of cool. I do like the use of edge points in 6th edition, and so that's what happens. So, so that's the thing about the combat system in 6th edition Shadowrun, which is one of the main reasons why people only play this at conventions and they don't really play it with their friends. They play 5th edition with their friends. Is that the combat system is a lot different, and it's not very much like Shadowrun at all. It's a lot more like Dungeons and Dragons. Now, there is something about gaining more minor actions by how many dice you have. So the dice for initiative do matter. Like if you're hot simming, you maxed out of the +5 dice, then you get 5 additional minor actions. So that's the only time where that kind of balances out a little bit, but not really. Because here's the pros and cons, and this is my final review, my thumbs up, not thumbs up end part of the spotlight. The final reviews of 6th edition Shadowrun. 5th edition Shadowrun I love. There's clunkiness in it. Don't get me wrong, there's clunkiness, but I've worked around it enough times to know that the clunkiness is manageable. It does have a barrier to entry though. There's a lot of learning. There's a huge learning curve for Shadowrun if you've never played it before. So always try to find someone who has played it before to help you out, because some of the things in there are really complicated to understand. But 6th edition, here's my review of it and my hot take. I think that streamlining the magic stuff and the hacking stuff was wonderful. 6th edition Shadowrun did fine with that, but it's clear to me that there was some testing issues, and this is where the controversy comes in. 5th edition Shadowrun was announced in 2012 by Catalyst Game Labs, which is the current producers of it. FASA, the original creators, does not exist anymore. But Catalyst Game Labs, that now make Shadowrun, they announced Shadowrun 5th edition in 2012. They got it out there. It was on the shelves 2013. People were playing it in 2014, right? Shadowrun 6th edition came out, so we're talking 2014 to when this came out, which was last year, 2019, summertime. There was a 5-year gap between when this was really commercially available and when this one was out. And so this one feels like it was rushed, or they didn't really put any effort into testing any of the new rules that they did. So that's the reason why people are really angry about this edition. And also nobody asked for it. Everyone was totally content playing this one for another 10 years, and then they suddenly dropped this one on everybody. And so they're like, oh no, you guys need a rules light version, so here you go. And what it feels like is that when they produced Shadowrun 5th edition, they then decided to immediately hate on it and make a new edition without really testing it. So that's the thing. But my hot take is that it's actually pretty well done. They really did streamline things quite a bit. Whoa, there we go. Streamline things quite a bit. So I give it 1 thumb up. This is the first time I'll give a game 1 thumb up. Because it's Shadowrun, so I automatically give it a thumb up. But I do sort of give it a half thumb. It did an okay job for the hacking stuff is way more streamlined. Like I said, hacking, magic, way more streamlined. The combat stuff is streamlined, but the way that they do the whole minor action thing, like I said, is really stupid. Your armor should matter, but it really doesn't, and that's kind of a really dumb thing for a game where you could die really easy. I mean, in Shadowrun, you only have 10 hit points, right? You don't want to 8 hit points. You do not want to get shot, so that's why you have armor. But it doesn't matter. So anyway, that's I would actually still say that it's playable. Lots of people say it's not playable. I say it's playable. You just have to get over the fact that it's not really Shadowrun anymore. It's kind of a different sort of game. It uses edge a lot more, so it's like a narrative token. It's luck points. You can use them all over the place, which gives you more narrative control, which is something Shadowrun has never done before. And I think that's the problem. Shadowrun fans are people who like crunchy, hard systems where the rules tell you what happens and not that you have control over it. And then 6th edition's like, no, let's give you narrative control over stuff. And I think that's the main problem. So here's my longest ever RPG Spotlight review, giving a 1.5 thumbs to 6th edition Shadowrun, where the things that most people are bothered by, I'm not bothered by, but there's that one major thing in combat, which is something fairly important to a game where you blast gangsters just coming out of your parking garage. So that's it for me. Thanks for sticking with this whole long video if you stuck with it. The song in the background, if you can hear it, I don't actually know if you guys can hear that, but the song in the background is Shadowrun Returns, the theme song, Welcome to the Sixth World. and it's from Shadowrun Returns, which is one of the video games that is based on Shadowrun. There are 8 of them. But the current ones, which you should probably look into, are Shadowrun Returns, Shadowrun Dragonfall, and Shadowrun Hong Kong. Shadowrun Boston Lockdown is an MMORPG. Don't worry about it. Don't play it. But those 3 are made by Harebrained Schemes, and Shadowrun's Returns and Dragonfall you can play on your phone. That's how I played them. I've played them twice on my phone, and that was an older version phone. My current version should just crush those games, like no problem. So check them out. Otherwise, that'll be it for me. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. You know how it goes, so I'll talk to you guys later.